Skype. Thanks for your time on SABC News. We saw Finance Minister Tito Mboweni holding that colloquium today. What are your thoughts on it?
Good evening. Well, it's been interesting to hear the words from Tito Mboweni this morning, where he seemed to outline that some sort of old school thinking in cabinet is still prevalent, that national treasury needs to be sort of put back into a box and sort of abandon some of their usual ways of thinking. And I think that the danger here is to see these colloquiums as a good idea when actually what we need is implementation. And I think that was driven home partly by the governor this morning, actually, Lesetja Kanyako, who said, now is the time for implementation at that colloquium. And implementation, I think, is far more important here, having a plan and actually delivering it, as opposed necessarily to the ideas.
I'm glad you brought up the Reserve Bank governor, because there's quite a lot of talk in South Africa about the Reserve Bank, their mandate, and some people saying that they need to move away from inflation targeting and take a look perhaps at money supply.
Well, this comes up every year or so. I think there's still a deep status in particular about the fact there isn't a wider mandate for the MPC encompassing jobs in particular. But let's not forget that there is still a massive battle to come in Q1 in particular, I think, from the EFF motion before Parliament, which is also ANC policy to nationalise the SARB. And that is a much, much bigger, more dangerous thing to be thinking about, I think, at the moment, as opposed to some of the finer details around inflation targeting or not. And broadly, the SARB is very credible. It's one of the most credible EM central banks globally with the current setup it has. And given the amount of financial innovation going on in South Africa, new banks coming in, targeting something like money supply, for instance, would be incredibly problematic, actually. And they're much easier and it's much better, I think, to stick with the existing framework.
I'm glad you spoke about EFF and ANC policy, because land expropriation without compensation is obviously something that's also coming to the fore. How are global markets looking at that? And is there a lot of panic around that?
Well, not panic per se. I think there's still a scratching of heads. I think investors now have done their homework. They understand the need, certainly, for land reform in South Africa, but also the pointlessness, if you like, of changing Section 25 and the fact that there are so many other blockages, more important blockages to land reform and delivering successful, economically positive land reform, which don't involve Section 25 at all. We've had the publication today and the gazetting of the draft expropriation bill. Having a brief read through it, I think it's going to raise some difficult questions. It's very broadly framed. There's no definition, for instance, of what speculative land is, the definition of public purpose for expropriating land, possibly without compensation, isn't well defined at all. So unfortunately, we're still in this realm of uncertainty around land reform. Even though one can construct a path where land reform is economically positive, we're still in the realm of creating uncertainty, for instance, with this draft bill that's been published today.
Let's take a broader look at South Africa and our economy for 2018 and going forward into 2019. The World Bank and the IMF both revising our growth downwards to 1% and 0.8% respectively. Is this kind of an accurate assessment of where South Africa's economy is going to go?
Broadly, yes. I mean, we're currently at 0.8 for this year. But let's not forget there was a huge sort of flip-flopping of expectations throughout this year. I think we started off around 1.25 for growth. That went up to 2% was market consensus, then came all the way down to about 0.5%. Now back up around sort of 0.7, 0.8 for market consensus. And this basically reflects the lack of Ramaphoria feeding into growth, the lack of any meaningful sort of resumption of FDI yet. And that's really the narrative for next year, waiting to see if those things do happen. But actually, the interesting factor around next year is that actually if we don't see those things coming through, there's going to be very few other drivers of growth. And so we've been revising down 2019 growth from around 2% now down to 1.5%. And if there isn't a resumption of private sector investment of FDI, that number will fall further.
Peter Montalto from Intellidex, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Shante, it's over to you.